Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's Full Press Radio Live. It is Thursday. I almost said Friday. It's Thursday. Maybe hoping to skip over Thursday Night Football, pretend like it just actually didn't happen. But no, unfortunately, we do have to live through it tonight. We have the Saints heading towards the Cardinals, to the Cardinals. And John, I'm actually kind of optimistic we might get somewhat of an entertaining game today. Not necessarily great football, but I kind of feel like we're in for something at least entertaining tonight, and sometimes bad football can be somewhat entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, Kyler Murray is entertaining to watch, sometimes maddening to watch, and then we're going to see some sort of exchange between he and head coach Cliff Kingsbury, because I'm not sure if they really like each other, so that's always entertaining. The last two Thursday night games were, 12-9 Indianapolis at Denver, and then 12-7 Washington at Chicago. So, I mean, we're due for some points. I would think that we'll have more points tonight than we've had in the last two Thursday nights. So this could be somewhat of a sneaky, exciting game.
Well, I mean, look, the good thing for the Cardinals is you're getting DeAndre Hopkins back. The potentially bad thing is he hasn't played in almost a calendar year, and he's coming off a PED suspension, performance-enhancing drug suspension. So I guess there's obviously going to be some doubt out there, correct? I mean, reasonable doubt that, well, let's see what happens after the fact. What's going to happen with the rust and what's going to happen with, you know what I mean? Like, again, not that I'm
do you get that in football that much, though?
Not really. Not really, but you know how it is, though. You know what I'm saying? I'm speaking not from my point of view, but from the general consensus or the general feel on Twitter. I mean, my concern is more that he hasn't played football in 10 months. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, how is he going to look? Not necessarily just in this game. Like, I would expect some rust and not a full workload tonight, but just in general, like, is he going to be able to find it out? Because this Cardinals team is not in a good spot right now. So, it's not like he's coming into a cushy situation. So there's going to be some ups and downs, obviously, to kind of right the ship a little bit. And then, of course, you have Robbie Anderson, who, if he does play, he is, they said they're probably going to use him in a very limited basis, which makes sense considering he was acquired 3 days ago by the team. So it's kind of hard, for him to kind of get in enough information to be useful. I mean, not that his talent, I'm sure, is an upgrade over what they have right now, but, you still need to get comfortable in your situation because you're doing stuff that you used to do with another team. You're not there yet. So we'll probably see a little bit of them, but I wouldn't get your hopes up too much. I'm just hoping for somewhat of an entertaining game because on the Saints side of things, it's looking like another Andy Dalton game, and you don't have Michael Thomas, which I guess, I would have cared last week. But I am 0-6 right now in my fantasy football league. So it's bad. It's bad. So the fact that Michael Thomas is once again out this week it makes sense to me because I just don't foresee it myself winning a single game this year. It's just down in the dumps, John. It's not good. I was lucky enough to even do the show today.
You may have to fire yourself as GM.
I'll have a shorter tenure than the United Kingdom's prime minister as the runner of my fantasy team. Actually, it'd be about the same. 6 weeks, right? 6 weeks. Boom.
Yeah, that's common in Italy. Italy's government usually lasts about 3 months, and they change governments, change leaders. Yeah, so that's why those countries haven't quite caught up to everyone. Although their standard of living is great. But the interesting thing about this game, Ian, is if both teams had all their receivers healthy, you'd have like a receivers fest.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because look at the Michael Thomas, Olave, the rookie from Ohio State, is really good. You got Landry is an outstanding receiver as well. Then on the other side, you're talking about DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown. AJ Green's a little past his prime, obviously, and then you add in the player from Carolina, who apparently will probably get in a fight with Cliff Kingsbury by halftime because he likes to fight his own coaches.
Well, I told you he's talked his way out of 2 teams already. Now, granted, neither have been very good, but as I said yesterday, teams aren't. I mean, we believe teams are cursed, but they're not really. I mean, let's be honest here. Let's be realistic. They're not actually cursed. You have to have poor performances across the board. So Robbie Anderson was a part of both of those teams. So there's a lot to be proven on his behalf. for sure. I mean, he's not a guy coming in look like, oh, poor guy in a poor situation. No, I mean, he's a guy who's talented for sure, and you kind of hope that it pays off. But this could blow up in their face big time.
Yeah, it's a weird situation in Arizona. I wasn't high on them going into the season anyway. I thought they'd finish third in the division ahead of Seattle. But you look at New Orleans and Arizona, they're always in these weird games. Like they go to overtime, they lose at the last second. I guess that's kind of the whole league. But they're both 2-4, but they're only a game out of first place because the NFC West and the NFC South, no one's really taken hold of those divisions. So the winner of this can kind of look at themselves and say we get a little extra break and, head towards the middle of the season with at least a fighting chance to get into the postseason.
Yeah, and look, I mean, we asked the question somewhat seriously, maybe. Not really, I don't know, but we asked the question, is Seattle the best team in the NFC West? And it's like, it might sound funny, but the reality of it is it's if it's not a serious question right now, it's not necessarily far off from being a serious question, because a lot of these teams are greatly flawed. Like I think, the Rams. First of all, I think I saw a stat where I think the Rams have only, very limited amount of quarterback pressure, and right off the bat, you're thinking, wait a minute, this is a team that you think, wow, what teams consistently get to the quarterback and are disruptive? Well, the Rams right at the top of the list. Well, they're not doing what they're really good at, so they have problems, John. San Francisco can't stay healthy. They just can't. Altogether healthy, I think San Francisco probably runs away with the division. Assuming Jimmy Garoppolo is under center. And to clarify, this isn't I think Jimmy would have been better this season than Trey Lance, just because, well, Trey Lance has such limited experience right now. And this team is again, healthy, very talented team, but they're not healthy. And I don't see, especially after what we saw last week or this past weekend, I'm losing more and more faith in this team, because they can't win on defense alone. It'll win you a few games. It'll disrupt a few games. It'll make people say, oh, well, maybe San Francisco. But no, the amount of health issues they have right now is too much. And then who am I missing right now? Who am I blanking on?
Are you talking about the West?
Yeah. Rams.
Well, Arizona,
Seattle,
Rams, and San Francisco.
Okay, I got everyone. Just
wide
making
open.
Sure.
Yeah.
So again, Arizona, despite their struggles, they're just as in good a position as any team in this division to make a run. And they're the ones getting back actual talent. So whether it solves all their problems, I don't know. But I am interested to see, at least tonight, DeAndre Hopkins and potentially what that would look like with Robbie Anderson. Obviously, I would have preferred, Hollywood Brown opposite of him. But, I think Robbie Anderson's a nice receiver when he's focused and winning. You know what I mean? So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah. Obviously, he's on his third team. Like you said, he shot his way out of the other two. He's a good third wide receiver if that's the case, and that would have been the case if Hollywood Brown was healthy, because you get DeAndre Hopkins, who's a legitimate number one, but as you said, he hasn't played in 10 months, and coming off the suspension, we'll see where he's at. But yeah, this is the league, though, right? It feels like 75% of the games are like, well, here's two teams. They both need to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. And then we get to the fourth quarter, and neither team looks impressive. And then someone makes a play in the fourth quarter to win. That's how close these teams are in the league. A great middle class in the NFL. There's probably half a dozen teams that you look at and go, well, they're really not contenders. And then there's probably 4 or 5 teams at the top that look really good, and everyone else in the middle is just trying to survive till they either get healthy or get their act together.
4 might be pushing it, John.
I think there's 3. I know.
And I think
the
2.
Giants are 5-1. Yeah.
Well, and honestly, I think 2. I agree with you. I think there's 3 real bona fide contenders right this second. 2 of them, I believe, are above the others, and I think that's the Bills and the Eagles right now. I think the Chiefs are that third team, just a tick below. But I've talked about the Chiefs' issues, and I think they have things that they need to work out for them to be. But those 3 teams are another level above everyone else. And then there's just this absolute mash of teams in the middle, melting pot, so to speak, where like some of them, again, there's more hope. Like, the Patriots feel good at 3-3 right now. The Dolphins don't. You know what I mean? So like they have the same exact record, but obviously each going in kind of different directions. And you can kind of figure, go through all the teams and kind of get a little bit more of a separation that way. But for the most part, they're all 3-3, and there's still 11 games left, Sean. I mean, that's the crazy thing about this. It's like we're talking about like, Josh. I mean, and we're guilty of this as well. Josh Allen is 100% the MVP, and the Buccaneers are lost. They're verge of missing the playoffs. There's 2/3 of the season left, essentially. There's a lot of time for all of this to kind of go upside down. I mean, again, I think the three teams at the top are going to be at the top, and you're going to see some of the usual suspects kind of find their way back into like the mix, because as much as we talk about parity, John, it's essentially the same teams with like a very small exception now, especially maybe an extra playoff team. You get a little bit more shuffling at the bottom, but for the most part, for the last 10-15 years, it's always like the same handful of teams that really matter. I mean, let's be honest, and that's how the NFL works. So tonight you have two teams that I don't think are contenders. I don't think they have any clear path to being a contender. I just think the Cardinals have an opportunity to potentially win the division and maybe win a playoff game if they can, I don't know, do the exact opposite from what they've done under Cliff Kingsbury since he's been hired.
You would think that they have the quarterback situation straightened out, whereas New Orleans is like Dalton.
Relative to
New
a
lot of teams.
I mean, I'm not as big. I'm not a big fan of Kyler Murray. You know what I mean? A lot of people were head over heels. Oh, this guy, this guy, that. I'm like, he's pretty good quarterback who has an insane amount of talent running and rushing. I mean, it's unbelievable watching him in the open field zig and zag and get around. But as far as quarterback play, and I think this season has kind of played out kind of how I expected. I'm on it, but considering versus the Saints, yeah, I think they're pretty much more comfortable with their quarterbacks.
You even look at the last 2 years, though. I mean, the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. They were 7-5 after 12 games. That was during the 16-game schedule. Got hot at the end. We kind of expected that, but they were 7-5 at one point. Last year, the Rams were 7-4, got hot down the stretch, and carried that into the postseason. Cincinnati last year ended up 10-7 in the regular season. I believe they were also 7-5, 12 games in. So what happens now, obviously, is important. You don't want to get too far behind, but you want to get healthy and get your mojo and then find out what your identity is and carry it on from there. And that's where we're at with, I'd say, a dozen teams. You're right. There's three teams that look to be better than everyone else. You got Minnesota and the Giants are both 5-1, but are people really taking them seriously?
No, because again, I wouldn't put any amount of money. I don't care if it's a penny, $10, $5, $1, any of that stuff. I wouldn't put an ounce on Kirk Cousins in any sort of primetime, big time game. I wouldn't. Right. And it's not like, oh, I'm just hopping on the bandwagon, all that stuff. No, it's like it's. I mean, there's one thing he's incredibly consistent at, and is underperforming in when the spotlight's the brightest. And what happens when you get to the playoffs? Well, that spotlight gets brighter and brighter and brighter every single game. And so.
Yeah, I mean, those are two 5-1 teams. And then again, I think, look, the Giants have done a great job this year, and they have some nice wins. But, they still have 2 games left against Philadelphia. That's going to prove whether they're good or bad or mediocre, which is more likely. So, yeah, I mean, the league is completely wide open, which makes it interesting. I mean, last Sunday was wild, right? I mean, Green Bay gets curb stomped at home against the Jets. The Buccaneers lose at Pittsburgh. Baltimore was a touchdown favorite at the Giants, had a 10-point lead, and blew it like they've done 3 other times this year. So the league is just that wide open. Look, even Buffalo, who I think is the best team, they do have a loss under their belt where they went up and down the field against Miami in week 2, but they weren't quite able to finish it off. Or week 3, I guess it was, and they had some problems in the red zone. And all it takes is one bad game in the postseason, and you're gone.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that's That's how hard. That's why it's so hard to win in this league. And look, I mean, we think about just the one little play here, one little play here. I mean, hell, just look at any Chiefs fan account. I mean, you get the whole what if every single time they play a game, even if they win. John, it's incredible. But that's it's astonishing. It's almost I'm almost impressed actually. But it's just that's why football is great. I mean, you can pinpoint and say any one play changed it, but it's a series of plays. It's a series of things throughout the season. So what happens now does have relevancy late in the season, but at the same time, at 3-3, a team like the Buccaneers, even though it seems like the sky is falling, do you think I'm going to sit there and say I don't think they're going to make the playoffs? Are you kidding me? Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, of course they're going to make the playoffs. Of course, I mean, they could struggle the entire season. They're still going to win 10, 11 games at worst. And you're talking about them in the playoffs, and all bets are off because, again, you have the quarterback you have and talent on the team. And that goes for teams like Green Bay as well. Although, again, you give a little bit more credibility towards Brady as you do Rodgers just because, well, we've seen it happen obviously more, and that's just how it works. It's not a hypothetical. It's not this. It's not that. It's what we've seen. So when it comes to who are the real contenders, well, we're going to lean on what we've seen, and what we've seen going back to Minnesota from Kirk Cousins is, well, he's not a primetime guy. So why would I ever think the Minnesota Vikings are real contenders? Now the Giants, John, I don't know yet. The Giants, they've far exceeded my expectations, no doubt. But it is only 6 games. I'm going to need a little bit more to sit there and say, yeah, they're a bona fide Super Bowl contender. So I would include them in that 3-3 jambalaya, I guess you want to call it.
Yeah, I mean, there's 14 teams actually now there's 12 teams in the league that are 3-3. That's incredible to me. That's, nearly 40% of the league is at 500. And, we're approaching the middle point of the season. And now teams will start to separate without question. But it's that wide open at this point. And just the nature of the sport, obviously, it's one and done in the postseason, which makes what Brady's accomplished even that more incredible. Because, you could have a bad day, the team could have a bad day, and they get bounced. I mean, the guy went to 8 straight conference championship games. He and the team did, which to me is that's incredible. So that right there makes a statement that for 8 straight years, they were one of the 4 best teams in football, in many cases, the best team in football. That consistency is really what separates him from everyone else, and which separated that Patriots team from everyone else. But the way we are right now, nothing totally surprises me. Although, as we said earlier, I do think Buffalo's the best constructed team, and they have more ways to beat you. But they do have a propensity of doing some stupid things as well. The impressive thing about Buffalo, I will say, is they had gone 7 straight. Their last 7 losses were all by 1 score. And, that's alarming because you're going to have a lot of close games in the postseason. Their last 2 wins, or 2 of their most recent wins, have been 1-score games at Baltimore, at Kansas City. Those are impressive wins, and those are the kind of games you have to figure out how to win in the postseason.
Well, and kind of in the reverse way that we looked at the Raiders and said, well, their luck is eventually going to run out. Right. Maybe Buffalo's bad luck, the opposite, is starting to run out, where it's like, okay, maybe they, just there was a couple little hurdles they had to get over. And, this is a team that we've seen progress year after year after year. So the expectations are high. And, it's all about watching them grow. And we've seen them grow in every every aspect of the game. So there's no question or no reason to believe that they're not going to grow in these 1-score deficits. So real quick before we move on, who do you got tonight? Chicago. I'm talking about bad football, and I can't get Chicago out of my mind.
I think
the Saints at Cardinals.
The Cardinals were in Chicago originally, so maybe, you have that one. Maybe that's a sign. I'm going to go with Arizona. At home, better quarterback, slightly better situation. I'll go with Arizona.
Yeah, I got to agree with you. I'm not. Yeah, this isn't. This is. I'm not going to say it's necessarily about who they're playing, but there's a large part of that because, again, like I said, Cardinals. I got to see some more out of them, but I do think that they're going to get the win tonight. So, concern, John, with the Lakers.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, yes, I know. I know. I
That,
well, obviously, I know you're a LeBron fan first and foremost, so that you can separate
I've heard
yourself
that.
from the Lakers fandom. Um, Bigger issues though, Lakers, and keep in mind expectations too, because again, what were realistic expectations for this Lakers team? I'm not talking like, oh, they have LeBron, of course they can go to the finals. I'm talking about realistic expectations for this Lakers team.
Well, I mean, in the NBA, we can always see teams reinvent themselves with a trade or two because the roster size is so small. So, you're hoping if you move Russell Westbrook for Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, that's going to improve the team. That's been a long rumored trade that hasn't happened yet, but maybe it will. The concern with me is Russell Westbrook is still their third best player, and he is just maddening to watch. I mean, he's the
Hmm.
most inefficient player in the league, probably the least self-aware athlete I've ever seen. And like he will not change his game at all. Like he will just not evolve into the latter part of his career where he has to change his game. Yeah, there's obviously concerns. LeBron looked good the other night. I thought Anthony Davis looked okay. The first quarter he was a beast. The second, third, and fourth quarters he wasn't so much a beast. He's got to be more consistent than that. But I just look at their roster and go, what do they have here? It's like they've
Hmm.
got cast-offs and undrafted free agents, and that's a league about talent. I mean, football, you can kind of get an undrafted free agent, and next thing you know, he's an all-pro cornerback. That doesn't generally happen in the NBA. It's about talent. And after LeBron and Anthony Davis, they just don't have much. So they're going to have to make a move. But yeah, they've got obvious concerns without question.
Do you think there'd be a lot more urgency or pressure had this team not won in the bubble? You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, because
Yep.
when you think about the big picture of LeBron's stint in LA, it's been largely unsuccessful relative to his previous stops. Let's put it that way. Again, we're basing his success off his previous success, which again, that's the only way you can really compare LeBron is to himself. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I don't. I don't know. Like, obviously, I think the expectations, from an outside perspective looking in, were to your point, pretty obvious. Like Russell Westbrook was an issue last year, not necessarily like. Again, you look at it and you're like, okay, just do the same thing over and it's going to fix itself. Well, no, it's
No.
not how things work, and I think that's kind of what the Lakers expected. Speaking of doing the same thing over and expecting different results, the Brooklyn Nets. Now, again, I asked you this based on expectations. Now, the expectations for the Lakers, I don't think were reasonably high. I think they were still pretty high, regardless of what happened in the offseason for the Brooklyn Nets. Um, that first game was a disaster, and I'm not sure if it's going to be any different much of the season. I mean, what gives you hope that the Nets are all of a sudden going to turn it around and play like a cohesive unit?
Yeah, that's a difficult one because they play no defense, right? And that was a problem last year. It
None.
should be a little bit better with Ben Simmons, who is a good defensive player. If he's on the court, he fouled out last night. It appears to me that their two best players don't want to be there. That's an issue, right? Like Kevin Durant demanded a trade, and then Joe Tsai, the owner, said, "No, you're staying here." So here's Durant in Brooklyn. I still think by midseason you're going to see Durant moved. I think it could happen with Phoenix because Phoenix may have a new owner by then, and they're paying DeAndre Ayton, who doesn't look very much engaged either. And you may have a swap of Ayton goes to Brooklyn for Durant and whatever other pieces you need to do to make that work. And then Kyrie Irving wanted to play in LA, so your two best players don't even want to be there. So I don't know that's not really a good thing. You want your two best players to be engaged so that the rest of the roster follows suit. Um, yeah, they've got their own issues. I think Stephen A. Smith talked about this the other day. I was on this about 3 weeks ago. I think the Nets would like to have Ime Udoka as their next head coach, and I think the Celtics suspended him rather than fired him to keep him away from going to Brooklyn or somewhere else. Because Steve Nash just can't handle this group. Steve Nash is not a good coach. He's a great player. Great players don't oftentimes make great head coaches. So yeah, they've got their own issues. But again, it's tough to glean much after one game. I mean, my Denver Nuggets, who I'm picking to win the NBA championship, lost last night to Utah, a team that's tanking. So I think they'll be okay after that. But there are big issues in Brooklyn. The thing with Brooklyn and LA, Ian, is they have so many huge stars that we just can't take our eyes off of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like you get LeBron, Durant, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, it's New York, LA. So whatever they do is on steroids. Whereas, Denver can lose its opener to Utah and no one's really talking about that.
Yeah. And well, I mean, and again, that's the domination of the big markets, and
Right.
not necessarily a East Coast, West Coast thing, but just big markets, New York, LA. I mean, that's it. And again, Utah is, to your point, tanking, and it's like, okay, well, it's Utah. Who the hell cares about Utah? No offense to anyone from out there in Utah. I'm sure it's beautiful, and all that stuff with mountains and Mormons and all that stuff. But it's no, but you look at these teams, and regardless of all these, like you talk about it, it's a star-driven league. This sport more than anything is, you can change on the flip of a dime with just an acquisition of a player or two. Now, sometimes the cost to get that player might be high, but that's how basketball is. You can change that quickly. So that's why it's puzzling to me that they, these two teams with the talent that they have, because there is talent, especially more so on Brooklyn than LA. I'll buy into what you're saying with LA, where it's like kind of like the big three. But even you said, Anthony Davis was okay. Well, Anthony Davis has to be more than okay if this team's going to win. That's what he was brought in to do, is be more than just okay. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean, he's supposed to be a top 10 player, and he has been in the past. The year they won the title, he was what he's always been before the bubble, which is a dominant player. The problem with Anthony Davis is he doesn't want to play center. He wants to be more of a 4, or it feels like at times a 3, and that's a problem because he's not a really great outside shooter. So again, I always kind of push back on an athlete. Do what you're really good at, right? Like, we're not asking Tom Brady to run RPOs, because that's not really what he'd be good at. He's great at everything else, so let him do that. If a guy's a running quarterback, don't take that away from him, because that makes him special. So it's the same thing in the NBA. Anthony Davis is great in the mid-range. He's great with his back to the basket. He's really good in transition, all those things. So let's, build that up, and then don't have him taking threes where he's at like 25%. Same thing with Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook should never, ever again attempt a three. It's not only that he misses. There's air balls. There's balls off the shot clock. I mean, he's going to injure someone somewhere behind the basket at some point. He's that far off. But yeah, that's a problem with Anthony Davis. Unless he just got happy that he won a title, and now that's on his bio, that when he's eligible for the Hall of Fame, and he'll make it his first time in because he's put up phenomenal numbers, especially in that sport where everybody seems to make the Basketball Hall of Fame. Say NBA
I think
champion,
I got nominated.
Anthony Davis.
I think I got nominated.
I voted for you.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. I've seen you play pickup. You definitely belong in there.
Yeah, I used to be a beast under the boards until I got old and my shoulder gives out every time I go up.
Ow!
Yeah. Well, it was more of a mental thing too. After that, I mean, it would still pop out, but my confidence going up with my right arm was greatly limited after my shoulder kept popping out. So, and the Celtics, thoughts on their opening night win? Because I think as crazy as it sounds, John, I almost feel like people are underrating the Celtics. You know what I mean? Like, I think people talk about Miami, they talk about obviously Milwaukee and some of these other teams in the East, obviously Brooklyn for obvious reasons, but I feel like the Celtics team is somehow going to surprise some people this season.
Well, they're the favorites to win the East and, in fact, win the NBA championship. My concern with the Celtics is Rob Williams. When is he coming back, and what type of shape will he be in?
Right.
They first talked about 4 to 6 weeks, then it was 8 to 12, and now we're hearing 2023. And then the second half of the season, like, what does that mean? Is that game 42, or is it after the All-Star break? And maybe that will work out because he'll have a shorter regular season, he'll have more in the tank, and in theory, be healthier for the postseason. He's a difference maker. He's the best defensive player on that team, not Marcus Smart, because he can defend the perimeter at an incredibly alarming rate for a guy that's 6'9", but he's also a rim protector at the highest level. I was impressed. Obviously, Tatum and Brown looked spectacular the other night against Philadelphia. Jaylen Brown obviously spent a lot of time in the weight room. He looked like Khalil Mack out there. I mean, he just looked like the biggest, strongest guy on the court. Those two guys are going to be just fine. So impressed with Malcolm Brogdon. He is so smooth and efficient.
He just needs to stay healthy. I mean,
if he can stay healthy. He's not another player. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like you're sitting there getting your hopes up, and it's like you just kind of sitting there like, just stay healthy, be in the playoffs, because that is a huge difference maker.
Oh my Lord! I mean, he's the third guy on that team now that can break down a defense off the dribble. Tatum and Brown being the other two. They don't have other players like that, and so important in the postseason that you have that. I always try to figure out, why does he get injured so much? He looks to be in really good shape, and he plays such a smooth game. Like, you would think that he'd be a guy that could give you 75 games every year, but who knows? But he's a really, really good player.
Who had one of the smoothest swings for the Red Sox for so many years? Just a perfect, beautiful swing. I mean, it was like the same swing every single time.
Oh, J.D. Drew.
Thank you. Wow, I'm glad. Yeah. That was good. I mean, I guess it was a very vague. I mean, vaguely.
I loved him.
Yeah, but again, same thing. You know, you look at that guy and always injured, always nicked up here, banged up there, and that's, you know. But you look at the guy swing the ball when he connected on. I mean, it was just like, oh my God, it's just a beautiful.
Oh yeah, he was the most mechanical base.
Oh,
he was
beautiful.
he was a scout's dream, right?
Oh yeah.
You go out to watch him and go, look at this guy's footwork. Look at the way he throws. He's got a great eye at bat because he walks a lot. Yeah, he was like
he'd be perfect for those Tommy Mansky instructional videos back in the day. You know,
where Johnny Damon wouldn't be, right? Because Johnny Damon, every time I watch Johnny Damon throw left-handed, I'm like, is he really right-handed? And he's just trying to learn how to throw left-handed. He threw the baseball kind of the way Tim Tebow threw a football. It wasn't very natural, and even his swing was kind of a chop. But heck, the guy had 2,700 hits and, you know, won a couple of World Series championships, one with the Red Sox, one with the Yankees. Yeah, so that's true. Sometimes the body just breaks down, and then there's other guys that look like they're out of shape that never get hurt. You know, it's just their bodies, you know, are able to react. As far as the Philadelphia 76ers in that game, I'm still trying to figure out why Matisse Thybulle played less than 30 seconds. I mean, if you look at the box score, he played, but it says 0 minutes because he didn't play more than 30 seconds. So they say he played 0 minutes, which kind of doesn't make any sense, right? Sounds like a Yogi Berra statement, like he played 0 minutes. Well, did he play or didn't he play? He's their best defensive player. Meanwhile, P.J. Tucker, bless his heart, is 37 years old and can no longer cover Jason Tatum. Not that there are a lot of guys that can. Like, why is Matisse Thybulle on the bench? He wasn't injured. He should have been on the court a lot more to at least try to get in the way of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. But long story short, I think the Celtics will contend all year long. Those two players look like they are so committed. Tatum is playing with a little bit more anger, which I like, a little bit more force. And on offense, they're playing with more force and pace, getting into their sets a little bit sooner. I don't know what's going to be on the defensive end. They still can hang their hat on a really good defensive unit. You just don't have to do it on opening night, especially when your offense is that good.
Yeah, and again, to your point, I mean, you really want to get Time Lord back to really boost that defense. But, you know, is it coaching? Is it, you know, and in some cases we see teams that lose in the finals or in the Eastern Conference Finals actually come back and respond positively to that. And to your point about Jason Tatum being a little bit more assertive and a little bit more aggressive, you know, maybe that's something he learned. I mean, we talk about learning experience from with quarterbacks and adversity. Well, this was some adversity right here. And then on top of the, you know, everything that happened in the offseason. So is it coaching? Is it this evolution? Is it a little bit of both?
I think it's evolution. Obviously, it was frustrating for him. From all reports are that after the finals, where he didn't play well, that, you know, he didn't want to leave his
Meanwhile, his total point total was up there with some of the league's best performers in their first NBA finals. But that's the standard that's set for Jason Tatum and how great he is.
Well, yeah, but he didn't play well.
I mean, no, I agree. I'm just pointing out how, like, the numbers can be a little. His struggles would be an absolute career series for most people, but his expectation and the reality of it is the reasonable expectation is for him to elevate in those big moments, a la Aaron Rodgers.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like obviously, Sorry for that. It was just a perfect example. You know what I mean? Like, great regular season, win MVPs. I mean, Jason Tatum may very well win an MVP this season. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Maybe a year too soon, but the point is he's going to get there. But when it's absolute, the last, you know, when you absolutely need it, that's where he and the entire Celtics team fell short, not just him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look, they're up 2-1. Game 4 at home, you're up 4 points with 5 minutes left. Like, that's not a done deal against any team, let alone Golden State. But they were in position to win the thing, and they couldn't seal the deal. You just look at the coaching change, and I look, setting aside whatever the hell happened off the court with Ime Udoka, I thought he did a great job last year. But he's more of a defensive first coach, and I think he really put that into the players' heads, that defense is the most important thing, which, I think that's what separates champions from non-championships is in that sport, believe it or not, even though there's a lot of scoring going on, like your defense has to be solid. And I thought the defense was good in the finals. Their offense wasn't. But now Joe Mazzulla maybe is bringing more of an offensive mind to it, and they're looking at the point like, okay, the other team scored 117, but we scored 126, and we were really efficient offensively. You realize the other night, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were combined 21 of 25 inside the arc. That's 84% on 2-point shooting. That's great from the free throw line, let alone the entire 2-point territory.
That's a far cry from going stretches during the finals series where they just completely went scoreless.
Right. And again, different situation, more pressure in the finals, also better defensive team, right? I mean, I said,
yeah, absolutely.
Philadelphia decided not to play their best defensive player. Like, did Doc Rivers bet the over in that game or something? Like, where was Matisse Thybulle? I mean, and PJ Tucker's like as old as I am. Like, I didn't quite understand that.
What do you think of the Joel Embiid play?
Oh, Joel Embiid and Marcus Smart? I think what they should do next time they play Philadelphia, just set everybody aside and let those two guys go at it. They obviously have a history, right? And it continues. But that's what makes the NBA entertaining is the personality.
Yeah.
Like, Joel Embiid is a gigantic guy who's got an incredible personality and, is a little bit chippy. We know Marcus Smart's chippy. So, yeah, I mean, they both overreacted without question. That's what's going to happen when those two guys are on the court battling for a rebound.
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, that's part of we've talked about it before, and to your point about, it's good to have villains, quote unquote, and villains.
Oh, yeah.
Villains are all relative. It's all relative to what fan of a team you're on. I mean, because one person's villain is another person's hero. So it's just in the context of sports, but it's good to have that where it's like it adds an extra layer, because at the end of the day, sports are entertainment, and it's like, how do you what's a way to make an eventful event even more entertaining? Well, you add layers to it. And when you have players that greatly dislike each other, whether it's just on the court or not, but I feel like we lost some of that, a little bit too, maybe I start sounding like an old man, a little bit too much jersey swapping and a little bit too much buddying after, I know people are complaining about, once again, for some reason, the old Ryan Fitzpatrick clip about Tom Brady not shaking his hand just popped up, but more of that. You know what? Screw shaking hands at the end of the game. You know what? Throw sportsmanship out the window. No, I mean, I'm being a little facetious, I guess, but no, I think it's great when you have these natural rivalries and these teams, hate each other, because it just adds more drama to the whole situation, and something that's naturally, and I mean something as in a sporting event, has a lot of drama to begin with, and then you add this element to it, and I think it's great. So I like when things get a little chippy within reason, not like, again, you don't want to be cheap, you don't want to be dirty. I mean, I'm talking like a little physicality here and there is a good thing in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the older basketball fans kind of push back the way the game is today, where everybody seems to be friends. They played AAU together, and they'll start screaming at the clouds that Michael Jordan would never have befriended an opponent, or Kobe Bryant.
I'm not going that far, but I do like that more than every player, just having a grand old time. Again, this is just me speaking like a fan right now, because again, that's, we are here to be entertained. I'm not saying like you need to entertain us. No, that's not how I'm saying. And I'm just saying, like, sports are meant to be entertaining. So from that standpoint, I'm like, yeah, like, I like that drama, not the stuff that doesn't matter to football or basketball or whatever. Like because there's definitely drama that people focus on that has nothing to do with the actual sport at hand. And that I hate, but I like the drama within the game, like the rivalries, the on-court, the history between the two, not like, oh, these kids were childhood friends. It's like, I don't care. Like, I enough with these like goody stories. You know what I mean? Like, I want these rivalries played up. I want, again, I grew up or in high school, I was watching the peak of the most recent iteration of the Red Sox Yankees rivalry. I'm not talking about the last 10 years. I'm talking about the actual, like, you would run over your own grandmother to get to one of these games because it was that. You know what I mean? Like it was
Mhm.
everything was on the line and the teams hated each other. And it adds a different element to it. So it's like when you're out there on the court, you get the feeling that you're always getting every ounce of effort, every, bit of energy to win that game because those players hate the other side just as much as you do. And I think
Right.
that's a fun aspect of sports, and that's why fans enjoy it. Again, I'm speaking from a fan's point of view. I mean, I'm not saying, you know, drum up some, artificial drama. No, I want it natural. I want it organic. And like I said, I like when fans are yelling at each other. You know what I mean? I like when uh, they're passionate to an extent. Again, non-violent, completely, just bitching and moaning about officials. I'm talking about like, no, I hate Joel Embiid because, well, the reality of it is he's really good, but you always come up with different reasons. It's like the same stuff with
Sure.
Brady, like, oh, I
Oh
hate him
yeah.
because he doesn't shake hands. No, no, you hate him because he's really good and he's won a lot. That's the reason why. You couldn't care less. Because John, if I asked you, did Bailey Zappi and I just did this before we got on the air again.
Jacoby Brissett.
Jacoby Brissett. Thank you. Did Bailey Zappi and Jacoby Brissett shake hands at the end of last game?
I would say that I'd probably have bailed out of that game.
Yeah, well, again,
sure,
you
right?
have no earthly idea.
Although,
and neither does anyone else because no one cares unless it's like, you know what I mean? Unless it's Brady.
I stuck with the Bills and Chiefs game. Again, that went to the wire, obviously. Buffalo had to have a couple of knees to finish that off. But I just wanted to see the embrace with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. Because, I think these are the two young studs. And, they met at midfield. And I think they have a pretty good relationship. They played golf together against Brady and Rodgers, right? So
yeah.
They seem like they have a pretty cool relationship. I mean, maybe it'd be better if the quarterbacks hated each other. But that's a tough one with the quarterbacks because they're almost like this exclusive club. They're almost like sports royalty.
And it's not like, because like, look, I mean, there was a ton of respect between Brady and Manning. I mean, and it was very apparent. I mean, even when they were playing, obviously more so now. Now that they're both Jesus. Now that Manning's been out of the league and they haven't been playing against each other for a long time. But there was also that intensity where it's like you knew that they hated each other's team. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Peyton Manning hated the Patriots because they were his chief rival. So there was a little bit of that, but at the same time, it doesn't rival, like I was talking about with the Red Sox Yankees from, some of those earlier, late 90s, early 2000s, where both teams were very, very good, obviously. And again, you want to see that. Like I said, in basketball, I like a little bit of physicality. You know what I mean? I like people getting banged up. Now, do I want my players punching other teammates in the face? No, that's crossing the line a little bit.
Right.
But I like the getting in each other's face and kind of getting a little tense because it makes it more entertaining. And I think obviously from a fan standpoint, that's what you want. You want entertainment and a good product, and that's what I think you get when you add that little element to basketball, especially because it has been kind of missing for a while. Would you agree? I know you watch a lot more than I do, and obviously,
there's less of it, but I think there's a few players that maybe bring a little bit of that edge to it.
He's definitely one of them. He knows how to get under people's skin.
Yep, I think Jokic also does, and he's got his like massive brother sitting courtside. That looks like
too bad he's in Denver.
Kill someone. Exactly. Yeah, they're going to win the championship though. So believe me on that. Yeah. So, but the Red Sox Yankees thing. I mean, I'm so old. I remember the rivalry in the '70s where there was a brawl before a game.
Yeah.
Like that's how intense that was. They had a Rico Petrocelli, came out of the clubhouse wearing like shower shoes and shorts and a t-shirt and like was, in the middle of a melee with other Yankees. I mean, they really hated each other. The guys weren't making the money they make now, even in, comparison to what the average salary in life was. So it was a different thing. You were drafted by that team. You grew up a Red Sox or a Yankee. It was kind of embedded in you that you hate those guys. Now it's a little bit different. They have the same agent. They're, like David Ortiz was a guy who just was friendly with everybody, right? I mean, he'd be at first base and he was a guy that was friendly with everybody. You go back decades before that, like Frank Robinson, who was a great player, even at the All-Star game, would not talk to his teammates at the All-Star break because he looked at them as opponents during out the regular season. That's a different mentality. That's an ultra-competitive guy. So, yeah, no, it's a lot different now. But there's just so much money that's out there that these guys would have a lot at stake if something happens. Like a 5-game suspension is a lot of money, so or you don't want to break a hand and void a contract or do something crazy like that. Back then, it was more the Wild West.
Yeah, oh yeah, Kevin Brown, remember that?
Oh yeah, oh my God,
punches a cement wall, breaks his hand.
Yeah, always the cement wall is undefeated.
Yeah, undefeated. Yeah, no, surprisingly, we've actually gone over our time, so I'm gonna actually nip it in the butt right there. Thursday. Obviously, tomorrow is Friday, which means NFL, and our game picks and predictions. So be sure to tune in for that. We will be hitting up the live show at 9 a.m. tomorrow. And then, of course, usually around 9:30 or so is when we start doing our picks, and we're going to try to do that. So definitely join us for that. And until then, hopefully, John, tonight we get an entertaining game. And that's what I'm really, really hoping for. Like, I don't want to be checked out by the, halfway through the first quarter. And
right.
Yeah. So
and thoughts and prayers for Al Michaels, who's only making $1 million for doing these games. $1 million per game. I love when people go, I feel so bad for Al Michaels.
I don't know, John.
He'll survive.
John, I don't know, man. You're watching the same games I am, and even I'm feeling a little bit bad for the guy. I think he deserves a little bit more than $1 million to withstand that. So But yes, we will be back tomorrow. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Give us a follow on Twitter at FPC Radio Live. And, of course, head over to fullpresscoverage.com for all the great content over there. So thank you, everyone, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.